Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Café DC. I'm your host, Faiz Rehman. This week, we're going to show you how a successful movie becomes so controversial and who is behind it. When in 1865, President Lincoln tried to pass the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery in the United States, a small northeast state, Connecticut, voted yes for it. But that's not how it was depicted in the Lincoln movie.
We are at the memorial of the 16th U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. This memorial was opened for the public in 1922. Every year, millions of people come to visit this memorial. Today, I'm going to ask some of these visitors for their reaction on the movie Lincoln and the controversy of factual mistakes in this film.
Can we choose to be born, or are we fitted to the times we're born into?
So the first question asked of these Americans was if they had watched the movie Lincoln. And the overwhelming answer was,
I have not.
I have not yet.
We have not seen it yet.
No, I haven't.
right. But why not?
I read the book and I know the movie is pretty long, so that's why I didn't go watch it.
If you can't take 3 hours out of your day to watch a movie that's filmed about a war that took over so many years and really helped to shape our country, it's disappointing.
Who says this is self-evident?
And finally, the reaction to the controversy of alleged historical mistake in the movie. The movie Lincoln shows the state of Connecticut voting against the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, outlawing slavery.
Blood's been spilled to afford us this moment.
Representatives of the state say it is wrong. They demand the movie be fixed before it reaches the homes of common people in the form of DVD.
Like, they probably have better things to worry about, and it is a movie, and they usually take artistic license in movies anyway.
If they want to present it as a historical movie, that they need to make those corrections. But if they're just doing it as it's a movie, then they have their right to say whatever they want.
When I looked up at the top of this building, I remember that all the states' names go around this building and surround it. Some of these states' names that are up here, like Georgia and South Carolina and Virginia, were Confederate states. As far as I know, there's states' names that are on here that weren't even states at the time. So whether they voted for the Emancipation Proclamation, for or against slavery, whether they're even part of our country when that whole issue happened, it doesn't matter. Their names are up there, and we all support the fact that there's no longer slavery in this country, and that man that sits inside of there is the one that led our country when that happened. And I appreciate that, and I think that that's a great way to represent it for our country.
Now a congressman from that state, Congressman Joe Courtney, is running a campaign to correct this error. And we talked to him about this whole controversy in his office on the Capitol Hill. Let's watch it. Congressman Joe Courtney from the great state of Connecticut. Right. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Why even bother about criticizing such a great movie, Lincoln?
You know, coming from a state like Connecticut, which sacrificed so much, almost 4,000 war dead, you know, in the Union cause, a state which abolished slavery in 1848, 17 years before the vote was taken on the 13th Amendment. Children of slaves were emancipated in the late 1700s. You know, this is frankly a very important issue to the people who live in Connecticut, and certainly, you know, the historic legacy of our state. And so when the error became apparent, you know, I felt that it was really important to notify and let Mr. Spielberg and his team know about it.
Congressman, Abraham Lincoln is universally known around the world, and the movie itself is also has been very popular. Lots of countries, lots of societies, you know, has been shown there. But for the benefit of those who don't exactly know the 13th Amendment and your objection, so can you please just talk about a little bit about the 13th Amendment, the context, the historical context? You did touch upon it, you know, just, sure. But, you know, I want a little bit more details
sure.
about it.
Well, again, the 13th Amendment was, you know, the amendment that changed the U.S. Constitution and, again, abolished slavery once and for all. And, again, if you look back at when the Constitution was first drafted in the late 1700s, I mean, this was an issue that the Founding Fathers debated hotly about whether or not that should have been incorporated. into the original draft and certainly the original Bill of Rights. Again, the Southern delegates to the Constitutional Convention objected.
Those were Democrats, by the way.
They were. Thomas Jefferson, you know, and some of his colleagues felt that that was too controversial or too difficult to accomplish. And so as a result, that, you know, we had a country where people literally were the personal property of other human beings. And again, in the North, where Connecticut is from, you know, states individually acted to abolish slavery, but you know, as a country, it was still, you know, this issue that we had to get resolved.
And Connecticut actually abolished and banned the slavery before even the Union did, long time.
Correct.
Long before the Union took this step.
And again, if you look at, you know, where in Connecticut, there was an author, Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was this book that really triggered the conscience of the country about the horrors of slavery. Abraham Lincoln, when he met Harriet Beecher Stowe, said, "You're the little lady who started this war." You know, to be sitting in the movie theater and, you know, being totally engrossed by this story about how Lincoln struggled to line up the votes in Congress, and then to hear the roll call and to have Connecticut voting no.
The misportrayal basically, in your opinion, was that, I mean, actually it's a fact, that Connecticut had 4 votes. Correct. And all of them actually voted for the amendment against the slavery. But the movie depicts as if only 2 of them voted for the amendment and 2 against the amendment.
Actually, the movie only showed 3 votes from Connecticut, and it was 2 votes in the negative and 1 in the positive. And so, you know, sitting there watching it, you know, this is months after the movie's been out, being a member of Congress, you know, it really kind of bothered me that, you know, this was in the movie. Again, you know, you were sort of hesitant to challenge it because the movie got it so much accurately and meticulously accurate that you were thinking, well, maybe, you know, my understanding is off and incorrect. But did a little check on Google, and you know, it came back.
You took the pains. You went to the Library of Congress and made sure that, you know, everything was. But before you actually came out, you made sure that you had all the right facts on your side.
We checked and rechecked.
Right. Have you had any support from your colleagues from Connecticut?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, what's interesting is that actually people all over the state, but certainly the congressional delegation, when they saw the movie, they had the same initial reaction, which was, can that be, you know, possibly true that Connecticut voted that way? I guess I was the only obsessive one who went and checked the record.
You became basically the face of this this campaign or this you know, movement against those errors. So I mean, and in general in Congress, do people empathize with you, other members from other states?
Absolutely, because, you know, I think what particularly for people who vote on bills, I mean, they realize that, you know, voting is not like dialogue in a movie. You know, it's not something that, you know, you can sort of give some slack that, you know, artistic license is okay to put words in a historic figure's mouths in order to make the plot move or the storyline to move. I mean, a vote is an event. It really is. And so to get that wrong is really, I think, in a different class of just having a dialogue or a character, you know, maybe do something that was a little bit, you know, collapsed into more than one character. And so, yeah, the response in the Congress, Republican and Democrat, has been universal. That, you know, wow, that was pretty good, you know, that you picked that up.
Congressman, I have seen lots of blogs, articles, editorials, especially in Connecticut. Of course, you have universal support, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times. Everybody basically is coming out and saying something nice about you and your efforts. Has it had any impact yet on the movie makers?
Well, certainly the individual who wrote the screenplay did respond, and he acknowledged that I was correct, that in fact Connecticut had 4 members of Congress and all 4 voted in favor of passage of the 13th Amendment. He, you know, I think took issue about whether or not that's a significant point for anyone to be concerned about, and you know, I respectfully disagree with them for all the
what
reasons.
was their defense for this error?
Well, again, it was a plot, dialogue, drama goal.
Fiction, historical
right.
fiction.
And again, so when the roll call starts, Connecticut's called first. The first two votes are no votes, and again, that kind of adds to the tension watching the movie, because you're thinking, well, is this really going to pass? Even though we all know that it did pass. I mean, the movie was just so well done, you still felt the tension. But again, if you look at the actual roll call in the Library of Congress, I mean, what you will see is, they didn't call it by state delegations. They did it alphabetically. And the two individuals who were number 1 and number 2 alphabetically did vote no. I mean, that actually is a historic fact, but they weren't from Connecticut. So, you know, that's really the issue. Yeah, and you know, if you look at the individual stories of the members of Congress who served from Connecticut back then, these were remarkable men. One of them was a congressman from the city of New London, which is in my district. He served as a police court judge before he was elected to Congress, and he actually had a case of a slave who escaped from a ship that ended up in the port of New London, ended up in front of his courtroom, and he issued the order that freed the slave. So, you know, this guy, you know, was actually quite a remarkable individual, that he, again, well before the Civil War and before he was in Congress, was already kind of really sticking his neck out in support of human rights when he had that power as a judge. And it, you know, the stories of the others, I mean, frankly, are just as interesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Washington Post saying that it's going to have an impact on the Oscars. Do you feel bad about, you know, Spielberg?
You know, again, I wish him all the luck in the world. I really do, because, as I said, I give him credit that he chose this topic and, you know, obviously put a lot of effort into it. And, you know, that was the furthest thing from my mind to sort of influence Oscar voting. I had no idea, frankly, when the voting actually takes place for the Oscars. If you had asked me before I wrote the letter, I would have thought the votes were already cast. Right. So, and really, my mission is really to just try and, again, appeal to them and the point of issuing the DVD release, to make sure that, you know, when school children, high school students are watching this movie, which they will.
So basically all you're asking, I mean, you're not asking to change the movie itself, just the DVD version of the movie has
Absolutely.
to be corrected.
Yeah, and I mean, the technology in terms of making amendments like that, as you know, in your business.
But where would they bring the other votes? I mean, if they, you know, give you those votes, like to Connecticut, yes, Connecticut, of course, would it then...
You know, really, to be honest with you, if they even
it's not your problem?
If they just deleted the clerk of the House even saying the word Connecticut and just allowed the vote to take place, because again, the individuals' names that they used in the movie were fictional. So, you know, at that point, it's really no harm.
Yeah, I think 6 of them were like actual
Right.
voters, and everybody else was just
Right.
fictitious.
I mean, I'm not sure why they did it that way, because personally, you know, the roll call provided the numbers that would have created that artistic tension.
Very interesting.
And, yeah.
Mr. Spielberg, has he weighed in?
No, we've not heard from
nothing,
him personally.
Nothing?
And, no.
Not even his spokesman?
No,
or
just the screenplay writer.
Just that.
Yeah.
So why is that, and why he's keeping mum on this important issue? I mean,
you know, I'm the eternal optimist. I'm hoping that, you know, we'll get some kind of response that acknowledges this. Again, he made a wonderful movie, Amistad, a number of years ago, which again was and Schindler's List. But Amistad was again an issue about a slave ship that ended up in America, and there was a court battle about whether or not the slaves should be returned to their owners. And the judge who issued the ruling in support of releasing the slaves was from New Haven, Connecticut. I mean, it was a district court case in Connecticut. And you know, I know he's had definitely contact with Yale University with various efforts as a philanthropist, very generous philanthropist that he is. You know, I'm hoping that, you know, those connections to Connecticut will hopefully you know, kind of motivate him to
what happens
respond.
next if they just don't want to do anything?
Well,
no corrections. I mean, what's your next option?
Well, again, to be honest with you, we've gotten you know, attention to this issue in a way that I could have never imagined. I mean, it's been reported in China, Australia.
New York Times is going to do something, you know, more endowed.
Yes, yes. I mean, so national media has picked up on it. And I mean, that's why I think they really should change it, because it's enough of an issue out there that when people do see it, there'll be, I think, a substantial number of people who will express skepticism about, well, maybe he got something else wrong, which again, I would never make that accusation. I just feel that it's in everybody's interest for him to at least make a notation on the credits, or what I would prefer is just an actual very minuscule edit to the...
But there's also another side, Congressman. I mean, some concern in the literary circles, especially, you know, movie making and writing. What they're saying, I mean, it will set a precedent that, you know, when you write historical fiction, you are supposed to take some liberty with the facts, and there will be always some errors, historical errors. There has to be a difference between a documentary and a film, a movie. So what do you say to that objection?
Well, again, I think this movie kind of falls into a sort of a different zone, because again, as Steven Spielberg told 60 Minutes, the news program that everyone watches in America, that you know, they just took painstaking, meticulous steps to have this as accurate as possible. That, I mean, they've kind of created a higher standard than just a normal historical fiction movie, in my opinion. And frankly, I've talked to other members of Congress who mentioned the Ken Burns documentary on World War II, where there was an inaccuracy about a family, 5 soldiers that were killed in World War II, the Sullivan brothers, and they had the wrong town in Iowa that they came from. And to his credit, he actually made an edit. He fixed it. Again, it was a documentary, but again, I just think that the nature of this movie is just so strong in terms of its power as an authentic accounting of history, and the fact that it will be used as an educational tool, that it really does fall in a category where they should respond.
International audiences, a lot of times they complain about Hollywood for misportrayal, misrepresenting the facts about other societies around the world. A lot of times it's just sheer ignorance of the writers because they aren't that exposed to those societies. So, of course, your stance on this error will be heard worldwide with a lot of sympathy. But then again, the idea is, what's the end result? I mean, if they don't just listen to you, if so far it's been almost, you know, since you first spoke, more than 10 days, yeah. And we haven't heard from the producer, the director of the movie. So what you gonna do? I mean, if everybody just keeps quiet and we don't find a result, so we'll just, you know, just push it under the rug and forget about it.
Well, again, I'm a strong believer in the First Amendment. I don't think government, you know, has any role in terms of dictating how movies get made. I mean, frankly, the First Amendment protects mistakes and errors, and I believe in that. You know, but on the other hand, I think you know, we're all accountable. You're accountable in terms of your job as a journalist, and certainly I'm held accountable as a member of Congress with my, you know, voting record and positions on issues. And I think, you know, again, if this still sort of stands, you know, frankly, I think the existence of the error has been publicized to a point where I do think it's going to kind of diminish a little bit the, you know, the treatment of this movie. And frankly, we've heard from teachers who have expressed misgivings about whether or not this is the kind of movie.
Because of this controversy, maybe more people watch it.
Yep, and again, I'm fine with that.
The world.
I'm not pushing for a boycott, believe me, because this is such an incredibly inspiring story. No, it's an inspiring story about abolishing slavery. I mean, and it was a real struggle. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives, and that's an important story to get out there. But you know, we're going to do everything we can to make sure Connecticut's members of Congress, who really, I think, did the right thing, are honored and remembered.
On a different note, you've been also vocal on gun control. Yeah. That's also one of your favorite subjects. What do you think what the President just said in the State of the Union address?
Again, you know, he came to Connecticut after the Newtown massacre. It's almost over 2 months now, slightly. And number one, I just give him so much credit because he made a promise to the people in that high school auditorium that this is not something that he's just going to let slip away with the passage of time. And just, he has been a consistent advocate for making sure that those kids and those families don't get forgotten.
Again, for the benefit of our audiences worldwide, outside this country, I mean, a lot of people have questions, whether it's just politics or lack of understanding on this issue.
Right. Well, again, there is an amendment, the Second Amendment, which does, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, create an individual right of gun ownership. Okay. However, the court was very clear that doesn't mean anyone can own a weapon under any circumstances. So people with a criminal record or mental health illness, really can be restricted by society from having possession of it, and that they don't have the right to own every form of technology associated with guns like multiple warhead missiles. So that's really, one thing you have to fight through, because a lot of people feel the Second Amendment just gives carte blanche freedom to own any kind of gun under any circumstances. But again, I think the law is crystal clear that even within the Second Amendment's boundaries, that we have the ability to have balanced rules. So you have to fight through that sort of initial threshold of an issue. And then frankly, there's logistical issues here. We're a big country. Data systems have to be, married and coordinated, and but frankly, I mean, those are manageable, and those can be decided. And again, I think the president has laid out a very strong, balanced package in response to Newtown.
What do you say about this gridlock in Congress? The sequester is about to happen, not too far away. So what do you think? I mean, how federal employees are very, very anxious. Is it something that just, the politics is going to go on and on this subject, or are we going to reach some kind of a...
Well, we've had some good news today. The U.S. Senate Democratic majority came out with a package which would eliminate sequester for the balance of this year, and again, would accomplish deficit reduction, which is certainly important given the state of our public finances as a country. But the fact is that, if sequester, God forbid, were ever to allow to go forward, I mean, we know it would damage the economy in terms of economic growth. It would affect our military readiness. There were aircraft carriers that were set to be deployed to the Middle East that are being canceled right now. Programs such as Head Start for preschool children would be cut in a way that kids would literally be, their centers would be closed. Title I education funding, which helps needy students, would be cut. This is really an indiscriminate, mindless way to deal with budgets. And it's unfortunate there's members, my colleagues, who think that's okay to just let it happen. But the president is absolutely correct that it would be a self-inflicted wound that frankly would have a big ripple effect on the economy. And at the end of the day, really, the global growth that we're all trying to achieve.
Congressman, immigration is not just an issue which is important to the people here, but outside this country, a lot of people are paying attention, not because they want to come to this country because of this, but because their loved ones, they live here, and lots of them, they are without any papers, any documents, and they're suffering. Do you agree with the president's proposal that something has to be done sooner on this issue, and do you expect both the parties to come forward with a solid, some package which can be passed?
Yeah, I'm actually quite optimistic, because an interesting thing happened last November, which is that we had an election, and I think the president, who came out very strong in terms of advocating for immigration reform to fix this broken system, and the Republican side, who were pretty staunch against it. There's no question that one of the most powerful reasons why President Obama won by a greater margin than a lot of people thought was because that immigration issue spiked and drove up the vote in his favor, particularly in the Hispanic community. And I think cooler heads in the Republican Party now recognize that if they don't change their staunch opposition to this, that frankly their political future is very much at risk. So that, and that's what elections are about. That's what democracy is for. So, we've seen a really impressive bipartisan coalition in the Senate, And even in the House, people are talking about putting together the first really, I think, comprehensive package since we saw in the 1980s. It is so overdue. In all of our congressional offices, we have district staff that deal with constituent problems, and our immigration caseworker, the volume of cases that she has is off the chart. And, for sectors in the economy, whether it's the agriculture community, high-tech, businesses that are desperate to get, really talented people, many of whom have been educated in the U.S., to have a system that denies our economy that workforce, frankly, is just so negative in terms of trying to, make a stronger country. So again, I'm an optimist, and that's one of those places where maybe the gridlock is going to give way.
Congressman Courtney, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you, Faiz. I enjoyed it.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Café DC. I'm your host, Faiz Rehman. This week, we're going to show you how a successful movie becomes so controversial and who is behind it. When in 1865, President Lincoln tried to pass the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery in the United States, a small northeast state, Connecticut, voted yes for it. But that's not how it was depicted in the Lincoln movie.
We are at the memorial of the 16th U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. This memorial was opened for the public in 1922. Every year, millions of people come to visit this memorial.
In the Union cause, a state which abolished slavery in 1848, 17 years before the vote was taken on the 13th Amendment. Children of slaves were emancipated in the late 1700s. This is frankly a very important issue to the people who live in Connecticut and certainly, the historic legacy of our state. And so when the error became apparent, I felt that it was really important to notify and let Mr. Spielberg and his team know about it.
Congressman, Abraham Lincoln is universally known around the world, and the movie itself is also has been very popular. Lots of countries, lots of societies, has been shown there. But for the benefit of those who don't exactly know the 13th Amendment and your objection, so can you...
The state of Connecticut voting against the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, outlawing slavery.
Blood's been spilled to afford us this moment.
Representatives of the state say it is wrong. They demand the movie be fixed before it reaches the homes of common people in the form of DVD.
Like they probably have better things to worry about, and it is a movie, and they usually take artistic license in movies anyway.
If they want to present it as a historical movie, that they need to make those corrections. But if they're just doing it as it's a movie, then they have their right to say whatever they want.
When I looked up at the top of this building, I remember that all the states' names go around this building and surround it. Some of these states' names that are up here, like Georgia and South Carolina and Virginia, were Confederate states. As far as I know, there are states' names that are on here that weren't even states at the time. So whether they voted for the Emancipation Proclamation, for or against slavery, whether they're even part of our country when that whole issue happened, it doesn't matter. Their names are up there, and we all support the fact that there's no longer slavery in this country, and that man that sits inside of there is the one that led our country when that happened. And I appreciate that, and I think that that's a great way to represent it for our country.
Now a congressman from that state, Congressman Joe Courtney, is running a campaign to correct this error. And we talked to him about this whole controversy in his office on the Capitol Hill. Let's watch it. Congressman Joe Courtney from the great state of Connecticut.
Right.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. Why even bother about criticizing such a great movie, Lincoln?
Coming from a state like Connecticut, which sacrificed so much, almost 4,000 war dead.
Today, I'm going to ask some of these visitors for their reaction on the movie Lincoln and the controversy of factual mistakes in this film.
Can we choose to be born, or are we fitted to the times we're born into?
So the first question asked of these Americans was if they had watched the movie Lincoln. And the overwhelming answer was,
I have not.
I have not yet.
We have not seen it yet.
No, I haven't.
right. But why not?
I read the book and I know the movie is pretty long, so that's why I didn't go watch it.
If you can't take 3 hours out of your day to watch a movie that's filmed about a war that took over so many years and really helped to shape our country, it's disappointing.
Who says this is self-evident?
And finally, the reaction to the controversy of alleged historical mistake in the movie. The movie Lincoln shows